It has been just a crazy ride. I know I was here last year for this event, and never in a million years did I still think a year later that we would still be in the middle of this trial. Well, I shouldn't say the middle. We're getting close to the end now, but you know, what a strange time to be alive. And the only thing I can equate it to is, like Ezra was saying, it's punishment. And they want to make sure that none of you ever get such an idea in your head either. And so, the painting that they did, wow. And you know, I like looking at that picture actually because I'm smiling. And I can tell you, when that happened, of course I was a bit anxious. I've never been arrested before. I've never been to jail before. But I had the thought in my head that, like, I'm not intimidating, which, you know, one of my charges is intimidation, which I get quite a kick out of. But, you know, I just thought, this is not a reflection on me. It is a reflection on them. And, of course, even when I was in jail, I just thought, you know, God, you've helped us expose so much already, and you're obviously not done with me yet, and thy will, not my will. And that's how I got through that. So, yeah, the longest mischief trial of all time. And I was talking with one of the rebels the other day because I'd talked to Chris Barber. Now, Chris and I had no contact order with each other. We weren't allowed to speak to each other unless we were in the presence of counsel. We had to actually take this to the judge. We did ask the Crown prosecutor nicely if he would consider dropping this after all the evidentiary portion of our trial was done, and he said no. And so we took it to the judge, and she agreed with us. And so I checked with the rebel. I invited Chris to come on stage with me to speak today. It's the first time that we've been able to come and do an event like Rebel News together. And I just think, you know, he is definitely my best friend. 3 years ago, I didn't even know this man's name. I picked up the phone one day and introduced myself. And I said, my name's Tamara. I said, my background is logistics, organization, and administration. You guys are gonna need money, you're gonna need some social media, and you're gonna need a little bit of help, and how can I help you? And the gentleman that I talked to on the phone was bright, funny, obviously loved his country, and I couldn't be more proud to be going through what we are going through together with anybody else. So if Chris could come on up here, please. Please give him a warm welcome. Chris Barber.
Thank you, everyone.
He's the most awkward man to hug when you're 5 feet tall, I'm going to tell you that. Yeah, it's just been, I mean, like I said, 3 years ago, we didn't even know each other, right?
It was literally the best phone call I ever answered throughout that time. It was a very busy time. You went from being just a social media personality in the province, driving truck and hauling equipment, to then being on essentially the world stage. And that phone call that I got, I remember writing your name down. I still have that book. Yes. It said Tamara in the phone number. And then history was born from there, and a friendship was born from there, and I can't be more thankful.
Yes. We had the best time driving across Canada, actually, and we often joke because we were both so busy. I mean, I remember at one point, Chris is, got Tucker Carlson's people on hold because he's talking to Sean Hannity, and we're just like, what is going on here? So do you want to talk about the convoy first? Do you want to talk about the trial? Where do you want to start?
Let's start with the convoy first, right. I guess. There was a night we were driving down the highway. We want everybody to keep in mind that we shared the cab of the truck with my 18-year-old son at the time, Jonathan, and the little dog Zippy. So the four of us, 3,000 kilometers with up to 30 kilometers, if not miles, of traffic behind us. It was an intense experience. We did 3,000 kilometers in what was it, 4 days?
Yeah.
5 days?
Yeah, it was crazy. And it was so cold. And this was just the most amazing thing. We have to talk about Manitoba because all of it was absolutely amazing. And I know I've said this before, but as we were getting closer to the Manitoba border, I remember Chris and I having a conversation about thinking, we were fully expecting the farther that east we went that all these people were going to start to disappear and when we were not going to have that type of support. And then we pulled into Headingley, Manitoba. And it was extremely emotional and we were completely blown away. We were talking like from Headingley into Winnipeg, all around the perimeter and out all the way past, I think, the Steinbach. Yeah, I mean, people, you know, the support was overwhelming and it didn't stop, even when we got into Ontario.
5 different Hutterite colonies came together in the southern side of Manitoba, came down to feed us at the Flying J truck stop in Headingley, Manitoba. There were so many people there, we couldn't get into the parking lot. So the police actually had to say, this is a safety concern, we can't ask, we have to ask you not to stop. And so we listened to law enforcement the entire time across the country. And those Hutterite colonies drove to Kenora, Ontario that night to feed us in a parking lot there in the bitter cold in the recreational parking lot. It was about minus 25 to 30. Your fingers were frozen just holding the hot sandwiches. And then they went home yet that night, so.
Yeah, it was.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. And that is just one more a sign of how Canadians just came together, and that's what made it so beautiful. This wasn't the Tamara Lich convoy. This wasn't the Barber convoy. This was the Canadian convoy. You know, these truckers started it based on the mandate, the travel mandate, cross-border mandate at the time. But what it turned into was a full-blown Canadian movement. If it wasn't for the generosity of Canadians that came or fed us along the way, I mean, it would have never have been the success that it was, and it was a success, in my opinion, even though all of the stuff that we're going through. But I remember we were still on the way to Ottawa, and of course, those guys are talking on their CB radios all the time, and Chris was talking to somebody, I can't remember who, and I think they were obviously worried and a little bit concerned. And Chris said, even back then, we've already won. And we did. We have already won, no matter what happens with this trial.